Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. My name is Ben. In today's podcast, I'd like to cheat a little bit. I'd like to bring Batman into the Star Wars discussion. So obviously, just like many of you guys, I went and I saw the movie in theaters yesterday with my brother, with my friends. We absolutely enjoyed the movie, all of us. I'm a huge Matt Reeves fan, but I didn't have a lot of expectations for this movie. I just went in to see the film and have a good time, and boy, the movie delivered. So I thought about it for a little bit, and I asked myself, what would be a nice and interesting way to bring this discussion into my Star Wars channel? Because obviously, all I talk about here all day long is nothing but Star Wars. Well, in one of my previous podcasts, I actually had a segment where I talked about, should we compare the Star Wars that we love and enjoy to other media out there? And naturally, of course, we should. And we always do that. You know, from your favorite books and comic books that you read, from your video games, you can always compare stories and conversate with your friends and loved ones and discuss, hey, you know, I thought this particular storyline worked here, or I really enjoyed how they highlight that character over there, or this show handles space combat very well, or this particular movie has better CGI effects. You know, there's all these interesting elements that you could combine together and talk about what do you like in one and where do you feel the other could compare to or could improve upon looking at something else. So I think it's a very valid point. So without further ado, what we're going to talk about is Batman 22 by Matt Reeves versus Star Wars pretty much from 2014, since we first got our showcase of what Disney is capable of with Star Wars Rebels show, and obviously in 2015 we got The Force Awakens, which launched a whole new trilogy. Since then we had a whole bunch of live action animated shows, we had a slew of comic books, we had books. There's a lot of content there. Primarily what I want to focus on is the Star Wars trilogy and live action films and shows. Why? Because obviously we're going to compare it to the Batman film that I saw yesterday. And the whole point of this podcast is not to say that, well, you see, this one is so bad, so poor, and I hate it, and the other one is so vastly good, I'm going to be a Batman fan from this day forward and nothing else. That's not the point, guys. The idea is to have an adult and fun conversation and to see where one IP, intellectual property, could potentially prosper and be influenced in a positive way by learning something else from where I feel was a stronger film in general, which is Batman. I'm gonna compare it first and foremost to the new trilogy, but also to standalone films and the shows. And the way I want to go about it is to break this podcast into several main topics. The first topic is going to cover the story. The second one is going to cover action and special effects. Then we're going to move on to the casting and representation. And the last piece I want to talk about is the overall vision. So let's begin talking about the story. And guys, don't be afraid, I won't include any spoilers of the Batman film. I will be respectful. I know most of you have not had the chance to see it yet. It's only in theaters right now. So, you know, go ahead and definitely watch that movie. I highly recommend it. But as far as this discussion is concerned, I will not talk about, you know, particular character arcs or storyline or things that happen. I'm just going to compare it very generally to what we see in Star Wars. So first thing that I really found very striking, very effective about the Batman film is that it's very experimental. Matt Reeves, being the writer and director of this film, he knows the Batman franchise very, very well. And you know that he's very respectful to all the material that came before. The Arkham video games, obviously, the source material, the comic books, and even the previous films, right? We had the whole Chris Nolan trilogy, which everybody or most Batman fans adored, even though it was quite different in its own unique way. And this is what Matt Reeves was going for, and I found was very successful, that he was being very experimental. He knows who Batman is, but he's pushing the story, in my opinion, into this new dimension, into this new territory where we have not seen much of this Batman as far as live action goes. Versus the Star Wars, in particular the Star Wars sequel trilogy, I felt it played it a little bit safe, especially the J.J. Abrams films. Now, that's not to say that it's good or a bad aspect. It's just, in my personal opinion, IP like Star Wars or any intellectual property, any franchise, begins to lose steam and loses audiences' interest when it's on the same repeat kind of like note, when it's trying to do the same thing over and over again. It's like poetry, it rhymes. and repeat the same character arcs, repeat the same story beats, right? There's an argument to be made that The Force Awakens, it's pretty much carbon copy of the A New Hope, the original film. I don't subscribe to that entirely, but you obviously could see blatant like story beats which take place in one film versus the other, and it's very hard to dismiss them. So I think when you compound your storytelling with similar kind of storytelling elements over and over and over again, it becomes grinding a little bit, and the fans start to lose interest and say like, well, what else can you show us? Okay, this was all fun and nice, because I have heard comments from original Star Wars fans from 1977 who said, you know what, I absolutely love The Force Awakens because it was very much like the original film. Okay, if you do that once, that's kind of cool. You get a pass from me. But what else can you show me? When are we going to go into the territory like the Mandalorian show where you're showing us something entirely different? That's what I'm looking forward to. That's where I think any franchise thrives, when it introduces new elements, new heroes. It expands the world and the universe. There's a lot of new world building going on, and the fans have a lot of questions of like, hey, what is this? Who is this character? What is that time period? And the answers are supplied in the new format of a show or a movie. So I felt that the Batman film made a lot of bold choices that made the character fresh again. You know, it's such an interesting character study that, you know, unravels this version of Batman that I honestly can't find that we've seen a lot of before. A lot of people are calling this particular film the definitive detective story Batman. And what we saw in Chris Nolan's film is mostly action-oriented Batman. He's in the forefront of the fights. He's there, fists blazing, and he's like dealing with the bad guys. Not to say that this film is lacking in any action, but it is a detective story first and foremost, and second, everything else. And I really appreciated that. Where with Star Wars, I felt that things were too familiar. And it's basically Rey is the recycled version of Luke Skywalker, right? It's the female protagonist version of a young, innocent hero stepping into the larger world. It's a coming-of-age story, and it has all the familiar tropes that Luke went through. Granted, I personally sympathize with Rey. I thought she was a striking and interesting character, but she could have benefited clearly from a lot of more innovative storytelling. And obviously, where I felt that she went through enough emotional struggle and self-identity and trying to discover who she is and not relying on the past like who her parents were and being a self-reliant and strong young woman, the physical aspect of her strife was not there. She didn't struggle as much physically, and I wished there was a little bit of more component of her training and coming of age as a Jedi, because we did see a little bit of her lessons on Actor, right, where Luke Skywalker, he introduces her to the lore of the Jedi. He tells her how the 10,000-year tradition of the Jedi has failed, and their hubris and the Clone Wars and blah, 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 all of that information there. And he gives her one or two lessons in what the Force is. I thought those were brilliant moments, but I felt that we needed to see more of them. And we needed to see them throughout the entire trilogy. In The Force Awakens, where we see Rey, you know, she is a capable fighter with this pole, right? With a pole staff on Jakku, she's able to defend herself. But then suddenly at the end of the film, she just knows how to wield the lightsaber. Once again, granted that Kylo Ren, we understand, is very wounded. It's also not his objective to kill or even harm the girl, which it compounds his task even more, because he's trying to capture her. He's trying to convince her that she should join him. And him and her should rebuild the galaxy as they see fit. I was like, okay, cool. So that could kind of be a little bit more problematic trying to capture her. But still, she's using all these force abilities and she's wielding the lightsaber. I felt like we're moving a little bit too quickly. And I think it's due to the fact that J.J. Abrams' style of filmmaking is at this very breakneck kind of pace. He rushes through things. It's like, hey, you guys are familiar with Star Wars. Let's go right into it. Bam, 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 bam. And things are moving way too quickly. I felt that he needed to slow down just a little bit. What I also absolutely loved about the story in Batman is that it is not a crowd pleaser. You know, we live in a very, very trying times right now, right? Because of the pandemic, because of the devastating news that we are all aware of what's happening in Ukraine, right? All of that crazy stuff and nonsense, and it was huge tragedy just on a human level to all of us. And to see a movie like that, which obviously couldn't predict the future, Matt Reeves couldn't predict all of these world events that would be happening surrounding the film's release. But we're here, right? And the movie is out and it's making that extra impact on you. And I could tell you guys, as I was watching it yesterday, myself, my friends, my brother, his wife, the audience, people had a reaction to that. It's a tough film to watch. It's not a crowd pleaser. Once again, it's very experimental and daring, and it's like so brooding and it's dark. It's a film noir through and through. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of heavy. But I want a story like that. I want something that is not crowd pleasing. It's like, oh, it's all cheery. It's all nice at the end. We get the big, happy Hollywood ending. It asks really tough human questions that we all confront. And I think it's very important in art and cinema because once a cinematic character raises that question in a movie, suddenly, you know, when you're dealing with something like this in real life, suddenly your struggle is easier. It's for a moment you're alleviated from all of these troubles that you personally have, and you say, oh man, at least I'm not the only person who's going through trouble in life. I'm not the only person who's confused how to go about life. Is tough, right? And when you see a movie like this, it helps you understand that you're not the only one. And I think it's just so important, and it gives a movie so much energy and power, which I feel Star Wars has been somewhat lacking a little bit. It's in parts it's there, you know, with characters like Kylo Ren. I absolutely loved Adam Driver's performance, and I really loved what they were trying to do with him. Instead of going for this typical villain, right, who's just a bad guy, he's trying to defeat everybody, we see his face revealed right away. If we had to wait for Vader's face unmasked until the very end of the original trilogy, here we see Kylo Ren's face unmasked and the villain being humanized right in the beginning from the first film, which was quite interesting, I felt. And we need more of that stuff. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say in this podcast that Batman is all good and all new Star Wars is bad. I'm obviously a fan. For any of you guys who have followed my channel, who have seen or heard my podcasts, I'm a fan of Star Wars sequels. I enjoy a lot about prequels. There's always something about Star Wars that I find interesting for myself personally. And it's not being just like a Disney show and say like, oh, Star Wars is great. There are things that I dislike, other things that I do. In case of Kylo Ren, I definitely enjoy that character. And it's something that I'd like to see more in Star Wars. I want hard questions to be raised. I want to see scenes where a son is so against his parents that he is having his mother's ship at a gunpoint and he's about to destroy her. That was such a tense and beautiful moment in TLJ. I want to see more of that stuff. And, you know, I mentioned that this Batman film is, once again, it's so dark and gritty. And the comparison I want to make to is, of course, the Rogue One. When the trailer came out, it was the film that most of my friends and myself included didn't think that we want that film. But when it came out in theaters, we're like, oh, man, what the heck is this? This is so different. It's so dark and gritty. It almost felt like the Star Wars version of Saving Private Ryan, right? That's what a lot of people compare it to, or Band of Brothers, if you will. And that's something that I believe Star Wars could thrive in, and it would make the franchise more fresh. It would help a lot of adults get into it, because let's face it, so far a lot of things have been treated with like kids' gloves. Even in a show like Mandalorian, we have an episode where it gets really dark and really gritty and like some mature stuff is happening. But then the next episode is like all cuddly and funny. I'm like, hey, here's Grogu. And it kind of takes you a little bit out of the experience, you know? So sometimes you just want a more niche Star Wars show where each episode, every element of the story is geared more towards adults and treats us with a little bit more respect. And when I say adult and mature themes, I don't mean damn rating, guys. I mean mature themes, like Rogue One did. Like all of these guys are throwing their lives at this huge and impossible odds, trying to deliver those Death Star plans. That's what we could see potentially more of. That's what I mean by mature story and that dark look, right? As the last scene of the Rogue One, where you see a ground battle happening and the space combat going on. I'm like, oh man, it felt so signature, so well done. I really want to see more of that. And I hope Star Wars in general gets to see the stuff that is being done by Marvel's and Marvel Films' direct competitor, DC Comic Books, what they're doing with their Batman films, what they're doing with their Joker film. And they say, maybe there is a demographic for this. Maybe there is a particular hunger for that kind of cinema. Maybe we can do something like this in Star Wars. Anyway, let's keep moving with my next point, guys. Now let's talk about action and special effects. And before we really get into it, I gotta say, everything that Disney has done with Star Wars since 2015 up to until now looks visually arresting. It looks spectacular. You know, when they said, we will give the promise of the original fans, where we'll use as much of practical effects and animatronics, all of that magic wizardry that made Star Wars special once upon a time, and use real film, right? That J.J. Abrams actually filmed The Force Awakens, and I believe also with the Rise of the Skywalker on the original film. It's not made with digital cameras. So that was interesting as well. So as far as visuals go, I have nothing to say about anything in Star Wars. It's just all immaculate. Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, the sequel trilogy, Solo, Rogue One, they all look absolutely spectacular. But also when we look at this Batman film, oh boy, guys, I can't wait for you to go to theaters, watch that movie, hopefully soon. I hope you drop by, and if you are watching this podcast, you will leave a couple of comments and let me know how you liked it. That movie is just visually arresting. That movie is spectacular. It is filmed and done in a very particular style, which is once again called film noir, this dark detective story film, and it just tackles it perfectly. And the distinction that I want to make here, where I believe that Star Wars could take a lot of notes from this Batman film and could also incorporate it into its own franchise, is that in Batman, a lot of action and choreography and visual effects are very, very memorable. You see intent and purpose behind literally every screen, every shot, every close-up on the character, every kind of like washed out color palette or scene and things are happening in the background. Nothing is done there for the sake of flashiness or just being like cool with your cinematography and say, hey, look what I can do. Guy Ritchie is one of the filmmakers that thrives on that. And again, it's not a criticism. Guy Ritchie is the sort of filmmaker who enjoys making these movies. They're just visual eye candy. Oftentimes, his movies don't have this greater goal, greater themes, just all about balls out action and just having crazy fun, things exploding left and right. I'm not saying this cinema doesn't have the right to exist, but those are the movies that he kind of makes. Where in case of this Batman film, Matt Reeves is an expert visual storyteller. Everything that you see here, from shot to shot, from scene to scene, from every acting moment, from every explosion to every fist fight, it just keeps on building this story and keep on building this huge tension and telling you who these characters are in that particular moment, whether it's an action scene or whether it's just people talking, a dialogue. Every single scene is done perfectly. Where in Star Wars, one of my criticisms is that, particularly in regards to the sequel trilogy, a lot of stuff felt very unremarkable. You know, things looked right. They look crispy and clean and, you know, visually beautifully done, artistically, but they're just not memorable. For example, the lightsaber duels, the first lightsaber duel we see with Rey and Kylo, my takeaway was like, okay, I like the fact that it leans on that original trilogy European fencing style, I guess. But it's just, you know, it's Rey trying to defend herself and she kind of like flails her lightsaber left and right. And, you know, Kylo Ren is doing something really cool with his like wrist guard. He was trying to burn Finn for a little bit. I was like, okay, that's cool. That's what he's using his lightsaber for. He's actually could use it in this particular tactic that we haven't seen before. But in general, the fight was honestly forgettable. Even in The Last Jedi, which I enjoyed that throne room scene, it's cool looking. Visually, it's spectacular. You have all these red guards are coming out. But honestly, I'm a huge The Last Jedi fan. But I felt that the lightsaber duels were there. There was a lot more visual flair to them than emotional content. You know, all of a sudden, Rey and Kylo is like, hey, we're on opposite sides, but now let's join sides. Hey, I'm going to just throw you the lightsaber. And once again, Rey, which once again, I will defend her. I will never side with fans who are calling her Mary Sue. She's not. There's enough character progression there to say like she has struggled through this trilogy, although it could have been done a lot better. But when she wields that lightsaber in The Last Jedi, she's like a master overnight. And it's just not very convincing. It's cool looking. And, you know, all of these red guards standing there protecting the Emperor Snoke's or whatever he's regarded there, you know, the ruler Snoke's a throne room, and they're supposed to be these badasses because they look cool. But these two young people just decimate them. And it's not really a good judgment of their skill level. Because in one movie, Rey defeats Kylo, but then we see Kylo over here is very powerful. But then in the next film, The Rise of the Skywalker, she defeats him again. It's not very clear to me. I'm throwing mixed signals here of trying to just understand visually who is more powerful and why. Who have more training. How very well trained is Kylo Ren? I still don't have an answer to that. What was happening during his days with Knights of Ren? Unfortunately, we never saw it in the films. And I honestly don't care to go and excavate if that lore exists in the expanded universe because the movie just didn't do it justice enough for me. That's just my 2 cents on it. I think it needed to be more convincing. Whereas in movies like Rogue One, guys, I felt that film had a little bit of problems like delivering the actor emotions. But as far as action is concerned, that entire third of the film, the space combat, the ground combat, the AT-ATs walking by, immaculate. It is tense, it is powerful. You know why these rebels are there. You know exactly the tactics that the Empire is exploiting to try to defeat them. You understand why all the ships are flying through that gate, right? Because the planet is protected by this shield generator. Everything was done just immaculate. You see, when your X-Wings, when the Rogue Squadron comes in and you see the X-Wings flying by, they're using particular tactics, all the call signs, all of the shout-outs, the military jargon they use there is just brilliant. It's immaculate. It makes sense. You could tell they spent a lot of time developing the script, developing the visual language of those action sequences to make it memorable. So I'm not saying it hasn't been done in Star Wars since the Disney acquisition. It has been. We just need to see a lot more of it. I need to see, for example, in The Last Jedi, once again, the first part of that film, the whole space battle, it's not memorable at all. We see Poe Dameron fly into space, one tiny X-Wing ship versus an entire First Order armada, and he's able to disarm all the cannons on that ship. He's able to disrupt their computers with his puny little calculating machine inside of his X-Wing and disable their shields. Like, it just looked ridiculous. It looked cool. Remember what I mentioned earlier? It looked nice. It looked right. But I wasn't convinced. It just wasn't very remarkable, memorable, or very well thought out. It was just one of my least favorite scenes in The Last Jedi, unfortunately, where I really was hoping for an intense and powerful action sequence. And it just didn't deliver. When you saw that space battle in the trailer, it looked insane. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait for this to happen in the film. And they throw it right there in the beginning of the movie. There's not enough momentum built. There's not enough of emotional component. We just know that the resistance is fleeing the planet. We know that the First Order is to intercept them. And the fight just happens. And Poe Dameron is kicking ass out of nowhere. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's the greatest pilot ever. This is where I felt that the movie struggled a little bit, and I wasn't too pleased with that. Also, in Batman, what I really enjoy is that the simplicity of things. You know, the fights are not extravagant. They're not complex. It's a perfect illustration of less is more. When you see Batman fist fight a lot of opponents in this film, indoors, outside, in very tricky situations, nothing about them screams like, oh my God, how the heck did they execute it? It's pretty straightforward. What really matters, though, is that all of the tension that leads you to those moments, how it was built, you are there in the Batman suit, feeling right next to them what this guy is going through. That's what's important, that the emotional content of the scene, the story part of the scene, why is Batman doing that? What is he feeling? And, honestly, when I'm looking at a lot of action, it's almost like the Joker film where you're looking at this stuff and it doesn't make you happy. It's not like, oh, cool. It's Batman kicking butt. You're looking at this stuff, and honestly, what you're seeing on screen, it's violence. It's scary. It's frightening. It's like, oh my God. It's all in the hands of a capable director who knows how to hold your attention. He's telling you, this is what this particular scene represents. This is who Batman is. This is what he's fighting for. And then you can appreciate all the cinematography in the world. This is where you can discuss the choreography and how the fist fights and how the camera is positioned, where the action is clear or not. I know that Chris Nolan movies, especially Batman Begins, was a little bit criticized where some of my friends and actually professional critics were saying that sometimes during fist fights, Chris Nolan's camera is not very effective because they chop a lot of scenes into very different frames, and it's not clear what Batman is doing. It's confusing visually. Where in this Matt Reeves version, I thought it was super effective. You get a lot of these wide shots, almost like 70s and 80s kung fu movies, where you see actors interact with one another and perform choreography for very long seconds together before we cut away to the next sequence. And that's what's happening in this Batman movie. It's immaculately filmed, but what makes it memorable and special is how the director is delivering it. How is he showing it to you? So from that standpoint, I feel that Star Wars has a lot to learn from this movie. And if they're smart, if they're paying attention, they're seeing this movie is generating buzz, and they're saying, hey, this is what Matt Reeves was able to achieve with his movie action-wise. Maybe we could have something like this in Star Wars too. Remember that scene, once again, I'm returning to Rogue One, when Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut Imwe, comes out there. He says, I am the one with the Force, and the Force is one with me. And you feel that moment. It's like, I am the one with the Force. You know who this guy is. You know who Guardians of the Wills are. They're protecting this fallen Jedi temple there. And he's telling this young woman that believes in yourself. And then he walks out, and all these, the stormtroopers come out, and he starts fighting them. You feel it, man. I'm pretty sure fans are discussing that particular scene to this day, because at any moment you anticipated that Donnie Yen's pole is going to turn into a lightsaber, and it never does. And it's so effective, and it's so cool, and it's so simple. Once again, there's nothing complicated about showing this action like this. You don't need to have Michael Bay level of explosions to impress audience. I think what really matters here is who these characters are. What is the story that you're showing me, and how well you're able to film it, how well you're able to deliver the story visually without any dialogue. When it's time for Chirrut Imwe to kick ass, he jumps into the scene, he kicks ass, and we stay with him. We stay with him throughout this scene. We stay with him after that scene. I'm like, hey, man, I want to learn more about this guy. I want to learn what happens between him and his boy over here. And when they die at the end, you're like, oh, man, I wish there were more on the screen. I couldn't get enough of Donnie Yen and his character. He was so effective and interesting to me. So this is what it is. As far as action and special effects go, I think the cinematography, all of the planning, the choreography, the space battles, they all should be in the service of the story. They all should be able to elicit an emotion that we should all, as audience, watch it and either cry or laugh, or in case of this Batman film, like I was yesterday, genuinely scared. I was scared of this Batman for a moment. I'm like, I can't believe he's doing this. Stop. Bruce Wayne, this is not who you are. Please stop. This is the amazing quality of film, what is able to kind of wake you up a little bit and not watch movies on autopilot and chew popcorn and say, oh, look, explosions again. Stuff is happening. Here's another Haldo maneuver, flying through the Imperial cruiser and exploding it, and really cool flash happening there. I want more foresight. Anyway, guys, I thought, I pretty much stated all of my thoughts here. This is what I think on action and special effects. Let's keep moving with the next topic. Next topic I want to cover is casting and cultural representation. And I want to tip my hat off to Matt Reeves and the casting crew behind the Batman film, because every single actor fits their role like a glove in this film. Robert Pattinson. I know that a lot of Batman fans were questioning his role and saying, hey, this guy from Twilight, really, honestly, can he act? We didn't see him in a lot of movies. Will he be able to portray Bruce Wayne that we all enjoy from the Chris Nolan films, or maybe a different comic book version that we anticipate? In my humble opinion, he nailed the role. I will go as far as saying that Robert Pattinson is my all-time favorite Batman. And I've been there since the original Tim Burton film. I think he's the best version up to date. I really enjoyed all of the other ones, all of the actors who portrayed the Batman before. I don't think there was a bad one to date. Maybe the movies were bad, Joe Schumacher, but the actors themselves did well. I really enjoyed Ben Affleck, but I felt that Robert Pattinson was the man. He was just awesome. He just relayed so much of that heartbroken child inside of a man kind of perspective that I really liked. Zoe Kravitz, right? I didn't ask for a moment or question why she's in this film. Lenny Kravitz's daughter. I didn't see a lot of acting of hers in any previous project. I didn't know how capable she is. I didn't even ask a question what her nationality or cultural background is. I don't care. She looks right. She fits the role perfect. She looks like Jim Lee's Catwoman 100%. Like she literally popped off of the comic book panel into the film. She looks right. She owns the role. She's beautiful. She's talented. She's everything you would hope for from a Catwoman. 100% there. Jeffrey Wright, amazing actor. Me and my younger brother, we were watching Westworld right now, and that's where I got mostly introduced to his talent. This African-American actor portraying a very popular role in the Batman film. And Commissioner Gordon, that we saw portrayed by Gary Oldman before, is now being portrayed by Jeffrey Wright. Guys, you don't question it for a moment. He's such a tremendous actor. He owns the role. He has that good cop persona, that noble character about him. You never question him for a second. You never ask like, oh my God, they're kind of like racially flipping the role right now. Why are they doing this? As much as Sam Jackson owned the role of Nick Fury and was a total badass, and everybody embraced and accepted them eventually, same is happening with Jeffrey Wright here. Because he's so well cast, because his character, Commissioner Gordon, is highlighted in this movie, and they really give them the spotlight, just like every other character, he works really, really well. Colin Farrell, an Irish actor portraying an American-Italian Oswald Cobblepot, right? The Penguin. First of all, guys, when you look at him behind all of that makeup, and I think honestly it's 99% due to his acting and not just the makeup, you don't see Colin Farrell in the film. It's a complete and total transformation. If the actor's ability wasn't there, you would have looked at all of those prosthetic effects and said, just Colin Farrell, behind all of that rubber. It's not really a good role. It's not a good character. This sucks. I'm going home. I'm not watching this movie. Colin Farrell transforms. He owns Penguin. Once again, this is the best Penguin we've seen as far as live action is concerned. He kills this role. He was awesome. And Jamie Lawson, this beautiful, beautiful African-American woman who portrays one of the candidates to be like the next mayor of Gotham City. Where in other films, and I will mention Star Wars here, you feel like, the cinema, the filmmaker is trying to be inclusive and have this diversity. And they say, well, we're going to have this cultured cast. And we have these beautiful actors representing this culture and that culture. And then they show you the actor for 25 seconds and the person completely disappears for the rest of the film. And you ask, well, where's the representation here? You just flash the character for 25 seconds and then they're gone? We'll get to Star Wars. We'll get to Finn, I promise, guys. But this is where I felt Batman truly shines, because the casting is seamless. All of the actors truly fit their roles, and each and every character is given their spotlight. Nobody's thrown under the bus. Each character has a particular role in this story. They're not just there for 2 seconds just to check that mark and say like, oh yeah, by the way, we need a Commissioner Gordon. We're just going to put this actor over there. Yeah, diversity representation. It's not done as a token just to put it there, just to pacify the fans and say that, hey, now you could see people of your own, ethnic background being represented on screen. It's done with respect to actors. It's done with respect to the source material. It's just immaculate. In case of Star Wars, and guys, once again, and no point I want to be a proponent of divisiveness in Star Wars. I'm not a hater. I enjoy Star Wars era from Disney, despite all of its problems, but I can't help escaping this little topic. Is the new Star Wars woke? I don't believe so. But there is a little bit of this forced identity politics in Star Wars, and I don't like it. Does it ruin my experience with Star Wars? Of course not. But it's a little bit grating because I feel like it treats the viewer like we're dullards, like we're idiots. We don't know that we're supposed to love and respect each other, and when a particular actor is on screen, we understand that we all want to be equals and stand on even ground. We all want Johnny Boyega to be as successful as actor as he is and highlighted in Star Wars and all these movies, but it doesn't always work out. And sometimes the way that the film goes, the way where the story takes you, you can't help but feel like, hey, so why did you introduce? Let's get into it. Actually, let's start talking about it. It's Star Wars trilogy tried to have and introduce characters and actors of for all demographics, all cultural backgrounds, and you see so much talent, so many beautiful young actors, and just being misused. For example, John Boyega, right, the Finn. He had so much promise in The Force Awakens. He's there, he's so energetic, and he's like, hey, I'm running away from the First Order. You don't know who these guys are. I do. And you see that perspective of somebody who used to be on the bad side, and now he's flipping. He's going to work for the good guys. And then he goes through this whole ordeal in The Last Jedi where he fails time and time and time again. I understand that's the general theme of the movie, but you got to throw the guy a bone. He's got to succeed at something, right? Like, come on, where are you going with this? And then in the Rise of the Skywalker, Finn is relegated to just running around and screaming, hooray! And that's all he does in the movie. And that really, really sucks because I love the actor. I think he's charismatic. He's this just handsome young man. He's performing well on screen. If you really want to represent him, highlight him. Expand his role. Make it memorable. Give him an action sequence that we couldn't forget. Guys, I dare you, give me an action sequence from any of the sequel movies with Finn that you thought was tremendous and memorable. When he fights Phasma, or those little, the pot shot verbal exchange he has her, like, hey, do we have a garbage chute? Let's throw her in. Really? That's what Finn should be remembered for? Totally missed opportunity, and I think it sucks. And I think when we talk about the matters of cultural diversity is that when you truly want to highlight someone, you say, we're going to cast this actor, we're going to stick with them, the studio is going to fully support them, and we're going to give them a major, major role. So all of the kids could look at him and say, like, hey, I could be like him. You know, Finn is a really cool role model, and I will follow his suit. Other characters, Oscar Isaac, same thing happens to him. He's supposed to be this potshot pilot, right? We have this handsome, super talented Latino actor. And then in The Last Jedi, he's grounded. And the woman is talking down to him, right? But Haldo is like, you stupid idiot boy, you don't know better. Isn't he supposed to be your best pilot, your best asset? Yeah, he's rash, he's headstrong, he's impulsive. Granted, okay, we understand that part. But you're on the brink of extinction. You're honestly not going to include the dude in your plans. And once again, The Rise of the Skywalker, Poe Dameron is relegated to a cab driver. That's honestly all he does. Kelly Marie Tran. That's another performance that is a huge highlight here. Actually, her and the actress who portrays her sister in the beginning of The Last Jedi. Now, Kelly Marie Tran is such a lovely and talented young woman. I'm so happy that her career is continuing with this day. She's doing a lot of voice work and, you know, showing her talent in that regard. So she's awesome. I thought she was a good possible addition to Star Wars. And she looked like this, like, really odd looking, like, anime characters populating the Star Wars world. Like, okay, cool, she looks different, and she's part of the Resistance, and she's supposed to have this dynamic relationship with Finn. Let's see how it goes. And unfortunately, I'm sad to say that in the film, it was so underused, and she, like, stole Finn's thunder in The Last Jedi when Finn, in this feat of, like, bravado and bravery, he wants to sacrifice his life versus that First Order canon. And she's there. It's like, no, we're going to save what we love. And she completely, like, dismantles his plans. I just didn't feel that particular role, if it really wanted to be representative and memorable, it was completely misused. Once again, Kelly Marie Tran is completely swept under the rug in The Rise of the Skywalker. She's not used at all. And it's impossible not to notice that. Even her sister, we see these two lovely young actresses portraying the Asian American actors, and it's beautiful. We should have that, and we should have more of that. But when her sister is gone in first couple of minutes of the film, and when Tika Rose herself has completely insignificant role in the film, and her only mission that she has in the film also fails, it begs the question, like, so what kind of role model is she? All right, that the whole theme of The Last Jedi, I'll grant you guys, is about failure. Okay, that's the common topic. All right, what's the excuse in The Rise of the Skywalker? What's the excuse of bringing her back into the forefront and say, well, this is where this character begins with a really rough beginning as a character in The Last Jedi, but now she really gets to grow. Now she really gets to help, and she actually is instrumental in helping the Resistance achieve the victory. None of it happens. So when I hear from fans, especially on social media groups like Facebook and Instagram or YouTube, Everyone says, well, if you say such a thing that, Tika Rose was a misused character, then you're a racist or this, and start calling you names. I'm not about that game, guys. It's just weird to me when studios try to say we're trying to be representative and, we're trying to be culturally diverse. I don't believe any of it, because I think the only sensible way to show and portray and highlight all of the beautiful diversity that we have in America or any part of the world, is by highlighting those characters, by making them significant, by throwing story segments on them that the story could not function without them. You got to give me a conflict where Tika Rose is involved, and without her role, the heroes would not win. She's instrumental, she's important, she's integral. This is what true diversity means to me. I'm all up for it. Cast whatever actors you want. I honestly don't care if the next Star Wars trilogy hero is a male or a female, what age group they are, what they look like. I don't care. All I care about is powerful storytelling, memorable characters, and whoever is looking at those characters, particularly the younger generation, that they're able to look at it and say, I believe in those characters. I want to be like that. I feel what they're experiencing, all of their hardships and troubles. I want to be more like them. So when we're comparing Batman versus Star Wars, I feel that the casting and representation in the Batman film is immaculate. It's the movie, the project that is developed with respect and regard to true cultural diversity, to casting actors based on the strength of their talent and not on a simple check mark to say like, hey, we need people of all different diversities in our movie. No, you don't. You honestly don't. I'm also considered a minority by the standards, of the United States. I'm a cultural minority. Do I want myself to be represented in every single Star Wars movie? I really don't. What I want to see is good character, memorable character that I could relate to and say, gee, whether I'm black or white or Asian, whether I'm a boy or a girl or I'm 15 or 45, I understand what this person is going through. I can relate to them. I want to be like them. That's what's really at stake here. This is what's really important. And the last point that I want to cover here, guys, is the overall vision. Matt Reeves and Batman, once again, nothing but round of huge applause. What they accomplished on this movie, I believe it's going to become a true comic book classic, an American Hollywood cinematic classic, and it will be talked about for years from now on. Obviously, I'm not Nostradamus. I can't see into the future, but that's sort of my prediction. It's that caliber of a film. It is truly special. Why? Because it has a clear message. It understands what it wants to talk about. It talks about clear-cut themes. It throws very evident questions at you, and it doesn't supply or provide all the answers. It engages the audience in a way that it allows you to live with these characters for 3 hours and understand their struggles and try to answer the difficult questions of life that they're going through yourself. And, you have things like vengeance versus light. What do you want to become? Do you want to be a crusader of darkness and just fight and instill fear in people? Or do you want to inspire hope? It's about the fact that nobody's flawless, that even good, kind people can be corrupted by violence or by dark past. These kind of themes. The film knows from the beginning, from the big intro monologue that the Batman has in the beginning of the movie, towards the last piece of the film, you know exactly where Matt Reeves is taking you. You understand the story. You understand what it's about. It's not about just thrills. It's not just about action. It's not about Batman flowing his cool new, cape, and we see like, oh, that's the kind of costume we haven't seen before. That's not what the film about. I don't believe for a moment that's what stays in our hearts. That's what Star Wars fans remember and take home and share with their families and share with their kids and grandkids years from now. What people share in is storytelling, heartbreak, love, role models, difficult experiences, inspirational messages, stuff like this. This is what makes all cinema good. I'm not saying that action or comic book movies should be all about deeply layered context. That's not what I'm saying. You could tell a very simple movie that is still very powerful. And in fact, I would go as far as saying that this particular film, in terms of structure, it's not terribly complex. It's a fairly simple movie. You have a film, you have a detective part of it, You have one major crime scene, and it unravels throughout the film. It's nothing deeply layered here or particular parallel storylines happening. It's one consistent story. It's simply done, but the way that it's done, it makes you, like I said earlier, I can't express it better than this. You forget that you're watching a movie. For 3 hours there, you live with Batman. You understand what Bruce Wayne is going through, and you understand what all the characters that orbit him are going through. It is not just a movie about Bruce Wayne. It's a movie about Batman and the people that surround him and love him, and people that work against him. All these evil forces, that he's supposed to defeat. Brilliantly done. It's a clear vision, and you could clearly see the planning. You could see that the script took time to develop. And for those of you guys who followed this project, we understand that it started in place A and it started with place B. It had entirely different casting crew. It had entirely different director and writer, and then it just ended up here. I'm not going to go into specifics into it. You could check out YouTube videos, but you get the idea that this movie took time to develop, and the result shows. In terms of Star Wars, I felt that, once again, I want to come back to the Star Wars sequel trilogy because I feel that's the most problematic one. We could also say the same about the Book of Boba Fett, is that there's a lot of mixed signals going on here in terms of what are they trying to tell us? What's the story here? What's the message? What are these heroes? Why should we remember them? For example, Rey. Earlier on, guys, I stated that I am behind Rey. I enjoyed her. I understood what she is. She is this female counterpart to Luke Skywalker, this innocent, naive young person who learns about herself, about life in general. The greater topic overall, generally, I think was okay, with a really, really rough landing with The Rise of Skywalker, with the whole thing. Who is Rey? There's so much set up by J.J. Abrams. Who is Rey? What is her past? What is she all about? She's relying on her past, on her bloodline. Is her bloodline important? And when they name her, she's a nobody. And then Kylo Ren reveals that, like, oh no, it's revealed in the movie that she's a Palpatine. I'm like, what are you doing here? Why are you throwing these mixed signals? It clearly doesn't show that it was a very thought out process. I don't believe for a second that J.J. Abrams knew exactly who she is in the beginning of this trilogy and how he concluded this trilogy. They are all over there with their messaging. They don't understand who this character is truly or where she ends up. So why is she Palpatine? Because they needed to explain away her sudden powers as a retcon to fan criticism, because fans were saying, well, how come she's all of a sudden so powerful? What makes her strong? What is her past? Is she Luke Skywalker's daughter? Something else is happening. Is she a Skywalker at all? And I think The Rise of the Skywalker is a representation of like, we don't have anybody behind the wheel. We don't know what we're doing here. Let's try to bridge the gap here, patch the hole, and try to explain away why she's so strong. Because she's a Palpatine. It's not convincing at all, at least not to me. If you guys think I'm wrong here, please, I would love to hear your comments. Let me know in the comment section below. I'll be happy to respond to as many comments as I can. I just didn't feel that it was effectively done. And when we see Palpatine in The Rise of the Skywalker, why would you need to bring an old villain who is clearly dead again into this trilogy? Just for the sake of nostalgia, because you need to complete the circle, because it's like poetry, it rhymes. It really is, it doesn't rhyme with the rest of the film. Because why? You had Snoke. You had one villain who was completely set up, and there was great potential in him, and then we see him in The Last Jedi. I was like, oh, shoot, okay. So Kylo Ren is going to kill him. He kills Snoke, and we see Kylo Ren rises to the occasion. He is the powerhouse here. He's going to take charge of the First Order. So I understood that flipping the script on us. And as a fan, I was like, okay, I'll buy that. I did want to see more with Snoke, but the leader is gone. He miscalculated with Ben Skywalker, right? And Kylo Ren ended up being smarter than he is and more conniving. And he actually kills his master. I like that. I'm like, so, okay, the villain was supposed to be Snoke, right? So he's not a villain anymore. The true villain is Ben Skywalker. That is cool. How are we going to bring the main villain in this trilogy back to the good light? Or is it going to happen at all? Are they going to be bold and brave and actually not redeem Kylo Ren? Is Rey going to have to kill him? Or another theory that fans had was, what if Rey turns to the dark side because she's already showing a lot of vulnerable moments there, and Ben will be the one to say, hey, you know what, this is not the way. I will abandon my evil ways, but also I now have to bring back this girl that I have influenced in a negative way. None of that is used. None of that is exploited. These new heroes and villains that were introduced are now being interrupted by like, oh, by the way, here's Palpatine. I just don't get it. All of those directorial decisions, they kind of give me mixed signals. There wasn't a very well thought out trilogy, and I just didn't see a narrative here. I did see a lot of more narrative from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi, where Rian Johnson, which his is my favorite version of Star Wars, because I felt he was the one who tried to do the most innovative stuff there. How he succeeds, it's all debatable, but he at least tried. And he took The Force Awakens and he said, okay, this is what you started here. I'm going to roll the dice and take it into a new direction. This is where I want to take these characters next. And I think J.J. Abrams or anyone else who was about to direct the third film should have continued that trend and said, okay, now the characters are here. What's the next logical conclusion that they could get to in this third and final film? What else can we do with these characters? And the way that the chess pieces were positioned in the board and where they end up at the end of The Rise of the Skywalker, I wasn't satisfied with that at all, because the sequel trilogy did not have a clear message. It did not have one uniform vision, and there was so much great potential with characters that they just didn't know what to do with them, especially with Rey. Like at one point, she's a nobody, which I felt would work really, really well for the character because, hey, you don't need to rely on your past. You could be like Luke Skywalker, who has a small beginning, and only later on he learns about his great family, his great past, but he doesn't rely on it. Luke Skywalker attains greatness through his personal deeds, and that's what Rey should have been doing. Instead, suddenly her powers are being explained away, and all her tantrums in the dark side are being explained away because she's a Palpatine. That's not good storytelling to me. That's not good planning, and it's just not good messaging in the film. So once again, I think this is where Star Wars could learn from this Batman film and say, like, hold on a second. Maybe we should hit pause with our live action movies. Maybe we should even consider choosing one showrunner, one writer, and one director for an entire Star Wars live action show. Let's spend a little more time planning. Let's try to figure out what are we trying to do. If this is going to be a Boba Fett show, let's figure out who Boba Fett is. He's this type of selfish, villainous guy who fends for himself only. So he's a bounty hunter. He doesn't care for anyone's opinion. This is what he does in the films. This is what he does in the comic books. Let's tie it all together, and let's give the audience a visual continuation of what they've seen in the comic books and books into live action. And let's be consistent with our storytelling. What fans found in the comic books, let's see some of that in live action. Where is all the bounty hunters that surround Boba Fett in the comic books, like Valance or Bosk or Zuckuss, all of these guys? Why are they not in the show? Why are we introduced with these random cast of characters like the cyberpunk kids who don't do anything for the show? That's what I'm saying. That's what I feel Star Wars needs, is that we already had some moments of greatness. We had some wonderful films, like for me personally, The Last Jedi, Solo, Rogue One, amazing Rebels show, amazing The Bad Batch show, which for some reason, the animated shows are a lot more consistent in their storytelling than live action. See, whether you like Rebels or The Bad Batch, it's a different story. That's not what I'm discussing here. What I'd like to say is that those stories are a lot more consistent to what they're trying to do, whether you like them or not. Where the first episode begins and when the last episode ends, you understand there's a logical continuation. It's like, okay, that's what they're doing, this is where they're heading, and this is the ending. Let's see some more. So I hope Star Wars in the future is able to look at the absolutely trend-setting movies like this new Batman film and say, well, let's take a page from the Joker, let's take a page from the Batman. Perhaps it is a time where we can treat Star Wars audience with a little bit more maturity and trust them to follow these stories that are not necessarily catering to all of the demographics. Let's create a Star Wars story that caters to anime fans, like they did with Visions. Disney's already doing some of that. Let's continue that trend. Let's create a show which focuses on more mature topics. It doesn't need to be M-rated, but what if we get an entire show like Rogue One? Like, there's a lot of hope for this new Cassian show. Let's see how that turns out. Is it going to be an honest-to-God war drama? Or is it going to be just a cameo fest? Like, hey, here's a character from there, here's a character from here. Is it going to hold on to one consistent vision? It remains to be seen. Anyway, guys, my entire point behind this podcast was that there's always more room for Star Wars to improve. And we as audience constructively can criticize it and say, well, like, I like what is happening better in this Batman film. I felt that the animated Netflix special Arcane did a lot of character developments better than this Star Wars show. Hopefully they will continue in doing this in the future. That's the whole point of it, to look at something that we enjoy and love and be constructive in our criticism and say, well, like, I hope they improve over here, but I really enjoyed, Tika Rowe's character over there, but I wish they did something a little bit else with her here. And that Disney starts listening to fan feedback, positive feedback, and say, like, okay, we understand. We tried, maybe our efforts weren't top tier with this particular show, but we will try next time and we'll do it better. Anyway, guys, please drop your thoughts in the video comment section below. I would like to know what your thoughts are. If you saw the Batman film, please let me know what you thought of it. Do you agree with my points? If you watch a lot of content outside of Star Wars, if you read a lot of books, comic books, science fiction and fantasy, let me know if there are certain stories that you feel Star Wars could benefit from and learn from. And once again, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really appreciate all of your kind words, all of your encouragements. If you enjoyed this content and you would like to catch my future podcast, please consider subscribing, hit that bell button, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.